Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're all about getting you up to speed on stuff you need to know, and today we're diving into the world of software testing, specifically test scripts.
Yeah, test scripts. Super interesting stuff, actually.
We've got a great source that really breaks down what they are and why they're so important in making sure all the apps and software we use actually work right.
Right, because who wants to deal with a buggy app? Nobody.
Exactly. And that's where these test scripts come in.
Yeah, you can think of a test script like a really detailed set of instructions for checking if a piece of software is doing what it's supposed to do. It lays out all the steps.
Oh, so it's not just a general thing like, okay, does the login button work? It's more like, click here, type this, then this should happen.
Exactly. It's all about specifics, like you said. Click here, type this, then this should be the outcome. And that's how they make sure everything is working correctly.
So it's like a step-by-step recipe for making sure the software behaves.
Yeah, you could say that. A very precise recipe. And I'm seeing here that automation scripts are a big part of this. That sounds pretty high-tech.
It is, and it's essential these days. Automation scripts basically let you test software across a ton of different devices automatically.
So instead of like manually testing on a bunch of different phones and computers, the script does it all for you.
Exactly. It's a huge time saver and make sure the software works consistently across everything.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, our source talks about three main ways to create these test scripts. First up is record playback. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Imagine you're testing, say, an online shopping cart. With record playback, you go through the steps, add items, check out, and the system records every click and keystroke.
So it's like capturing a video of your actions, but instead of a video, it's a script that can be replayed.
Yeah, exactly. And it uses that recording to create a basic test script. It's super handy for getting started, especially since you don't need to write any code at first.
That sounds pretty user-friendly.
Oh, it is, for sure. It often uses simpler scripting languages like VBScript, which are a bit easier to grasp.
But reading on here, it seems like it's not a perfect solution. Something about needing coding for tweaks and fixes.
You're right. Record playback is great for a starting point, but things change, The layout of a website might change, a button might move, and suddenly your recorded script doesn't work anymore.
Ah, so it needs adjustments to keep up with the changes.
Yep. That's where coding comes in. You got to make the scripts more flexible, handle potential errors, and just make them more robust overall.
Makes sense. So it's a good starting point, but you need to be ready to dive into the code eventually.
Yep, that's the reality.
Okay, the second method is keyword data-driven scripting. This one sounds interesting. It mentions separate roles for testers and developers.
Right, this was all about teamwork. Testers, who are usually the ones who know how the software should work, use keywords to define the tests. Things like login, click, verify, that sort of thing.
So they're not writing the actual code, they're just saying what needs to be tested.
Exactly. And the developers, they take those keywords and write the actual code that makes those actions happen within the application.
So it's like the testers are saying, okay, we need to test if this button works, and the developers are figuring out how to make that happen in the code.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That seems pretty efficient, especially if you've got testers who are really good at understanding the user experience, but maybe don't have a strong coding background.
Absolutely. That's one of the big advantages of this approach.
But there's a catch, right? The source mentions something about being dependent on the developers.
Yeah, the downside is that if testers need to test something totally new, something there isn't already a keyword for, then they have to rely on the developers to create it.
Okay, so it works great for existing features, but maybe not so much for brand new stuff. Got it.
Right.
And then the third approach is writing code using a programming language. That sounds like, well, the most direct, but maybe also the most challenging.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. With this method, you're basically writing the test scripts from scratch using programming languages like JavaScript or Ruby.
And does it matter what language the application itself is written in?
Not necessarily. Our source specifically says that you could have an app written in, say, Java, but still write your test scripts in something like JavaScript.
So the testing language doesn't have to match the application language, huh?
Nope. The important thing is choosing a language that's good for testing. It's something with good tools for interacting with web browsers or app interfaces.
So a language that's well suited for the job, even if it's not the same one used to build the app itself.
Exactly.
Now, to make all this a bit more concrete, the source gives this really cool example of testing a website login.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Let's walk through it. It starts by talking about how to actually find the username and password fields on the page Something about using CSS element
Right.
IDs.
Those IDs are like unique identifiers for each element on the web page. It's how the script knows exactly where to type the username and password.
So it's not just saying find the username field, it's giving very precise instructions on where to find it in the code.
Yep, precisely.
Okay, then what?
So next, the script would tell the system, okay, load the website's home page and click on the login link.
Pretty straightforward so far.
Yeah, then it actually checks to make sure the login screen has appeared and that the username and password fields are visible.
So it doesn't just assume everything loaded correctly, it actually verifies it.
Yeah, that's important. You want to make sure everything is actually there before proceeding.
Makes sense.
Then it would type in a specific username and password, maybe something like Charles and 123456, and click the confirm button.
Okay, so now it's actually trying to log in.
Exactly. But the login itself isn't the end of the test.
Right, it needs to make sure the login was successful.
Yep, so the script would then look for the welcome screen, the one that appears after a successful login.
And again, it's not just assuming the welcome screen is there, right?
Nope, it specifically checks that it's visible on the page and then reads the text of the title.
And it compares that text to what it should say, like welcome Charles. That's how it knows if the test passed or failed.
Exactly. The script records whether the actual welcome message matches what was expected. That's how it determines success or failure.
That example makes it much clearer how these scripts work, all those tiny steps.
Right, and that attention to detail is what makes them so effective at catching errors.
The source also offers some tips for writing these scripts, and the first one is clarity. That seems obvious, but why is it so important for test scripts specifically?
Well, think about it. If a test script is hard to understand, it'll slow down the whole testing process. Testers will be confused, developers won't know what to fix if something breaks. Clarity is key.
So a poorly written script can create a lot of headaches down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Clear, concise steps. That's what you want.
Okay, next tip. Simplicity. It says that each script should focus on a single, specific action. Why is that? Wouldn't it be more efficient to test multiple things at once?
You might think so, but
Right.
trust me, keeping it simple is better. If you've got one big script texting a bunch of things and it fails, it's a nightmare to figure out what went wrong.
Oh, I see. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack if the script is too complex.
Exactly. With simple scripts, if something breaks, you know exactly where the problem is.
Makes sense.
Plus, it keeps you focused. You're less likely to miss testing something important if each script has one clear purpose.
The last tip here is have a well-thought-out approach and encourages thinking from the user's perspective. How does that help with writing better test scripts?
Well, if you put yourself in the user's shoes, you'll think of all the different ways they might use the software. Not just the ideal way, but also, the weird stuff people might try to do.
So thinking about all the edge cases, the things that could go wrong.
Yep, exactly. It helps you write scripts that test for those unexpected scenarios, which can catch some really tricky bugs.
Okay, so those are the key tips. Now, why use this whole test script approach in the first place? The source highlights reliability, making sure nothing gets missed. That seems pretty crucial.
Oh, it's essential. Test scripts ensure everything is tested consistently every single time. You don't have to worry about human error, like someone forgetting a step or not checking something thoroughly.
It takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. And because it's so systematic, there's less room for error overall. Testers can't miss features or assume something works without actually verifying it.
It sounds like test scripts bring a real level of precision and objectivity to the whole process.
Absolutely. They enforce a very disciplined approach. Everything is measured and verified, especially important when an application's performance is super critical.
Right, like if it's a medical app or something that controls a machine.
Yeah, exactly. Those are situations where even small errors can have huge consequences.
Okay, moving on. The source mentions something called test script templates. What are those and what's the point of them?
Think of a test script template, like a blueprint for creating test scripts. It's a standardized document that defines all the information that should be included in each test case.
So it's like a fill-in-the-blanks form that ensures all the test scripts are consistent and have all the necessary information.
You got it. It makes things way easier to manage and analyze later on.
Organization is key.
Always. Now, one last thing the source clarifies is the difference between a test case and a test script. They seem similar, but there's a key distinction.
Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on that.
Well, a test case is basically a set of steps for a human tester to follow. It's all manual. A test script, on the other hand, is the set of automated instructions for a computer to follow.
So test cases are for humans, test scripts are for machines.
Exactly. One's a plan, The other is the automated execution of that plan.
Got it. Okay, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways here, the things you really want to remember about test scripts?
Okay, so first, remember that test scripts are super detailed, step-by-step instructions for automatically checking if software works. They lay out exactly what should happen.
And they're not just one size fits all. There are different ways to create them depending on the project and the team's skills.
Right. You've got record playback for a quick start, keyword-driven for collaboration, and then writing code directly for maximum flexibility.
And it's super important to keep those scripts clear, concise, and focused on one thing at a time. Makes them easier to understand and troubleshoot.
Couldn't agree more. And overall, using test scripts just makes the whole testing process more reliable and accurate. Less chance of missing things or making assumptions.
So understanding test scripts gives you a peek behind the curtain of software development, showing how much work goes into making sure the apps and websites we use actually work right.
It really does. And it highlights how crucial careful planning and automation are these days.
This has been a fascinating look at something most people probably don't even think about. We just expect our software to work, but there's a whole world of detailed testing going on behind the scenes.
And that testing is what helps make that smooth experience possible.
Now, I want you to think about how these different approaches to testing might apply in different software development situations, or even in other fields where processes need to be validated really carefully.
It makes you wonder what other hidden processes are out there, working hard to keep our technology running smoothly. It's a fascinating world if you stop to think about it.
It really is.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
Until next time.